My family spent $570,000 on an extravagant wedding but refused to help when my daughter's life was in danger. When they found themselves in trouble, they turned to me, hoping I would help them. Hey everyone, before we jump into today's story, just a quick favor. If you enjoy content like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. This is completely free, helps support the channel, and ensures you never miss out on more incredible stories. Alright, let's get started. I never expected to be the golden child, but I didn't think I'd be disposable either. My name is Ryan, and this is the story of how my so-called family chose luxury over loyalty and how karma finally came knocking. I grew up in a house where appearances were everything. My parents, Richard and Laura, owned a furniture business they marketed as high-end, though in reality they were barely holding it together. They drove leased luxury cars, threw extravagant parties, and acted as if we were old money royalty. But it was all for show. The truth was, they lived paycheck to paycheck, spending more on their reputation than on the people around them. I have a younger brother, Nate. From the moment he was born, it was obvious that he was their favorite. If I got straight A's, I'd get a nod of approval. If Nate managed a B-, they'd throw a dinner party to celebrate his brilliance. College? When I left for university, they waved me off like I was catching a bus. When Nate enrolled in a local community college while still living at home, they threw a massive send-off party as if he were heading to Harvard. By the time I graduated, I knew better than to expect support from them. I built my life on my own terms, started a small interior design firm in Austin, and married the love of my life, Emily. We had our daughter, Lily, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I had real family, one that didn't love with conditions. Life was good. Not extravagant, not Instagram perfect, but truly good. That was until the day Lily collapsed on our living room floor. Started so simply, just a cough. Nothing to worry about, we thought. Kids get sick all the time, right? A little cold, maybe a slight fever. But as the days passed, something didn't feel right. Lily didn't get better. Her cough lingered, persistent and harsh. Then it started to change. She stopped running around the house, her boundless energy fading. First, I brushed it off. I'd see her sitting quietly, which was unusual for a girl who was always in motion. I assumed she was just tired, maybe a little under the weather. But then it escalated. She'd stop playing mid-action, clutching her chest like something was wrong. She gasped for air as though she couldn't catch her breath. Those moments were small, barely noticeable at first. But then the low fever came, a constant presence that hovered just below panic level. Not high enough to be alarming, but persistent enough to weigh on us. Emily started noticing it more than I did as she was home with Lily all day. She'd mention it to me when I got home from work. How Lily seemed different, how something wasn't quite right. I'd brush it off, telling her kids get sick all the time, that she was probably fine. I didn't want to admit it, didn't want to face it, but deep down, a part of me knew something wasn't right. The real turning point came one evening. Lily had been playing with her toys in the living room when Emily called me into the room. My heart dropped when I saw her face. Lily was sitting on the floor, her eyes dull and glazed over. Her breath was quick and shallow, as though she couldn't get enough air. She looked exhausted, like a little girl who had run a marathon but never stopped to rest. "Something's wrong," Emily whispered, panic in her voice. I knew that look. It was the kind of look a parent gets when they know deep down something is terribly, terribly wrong. I wanted to tell her that it was just a phase, that we were overthinking it, but I couldn't. Not anymore. I grabbed Lily in my arms, her tiny body limp against mine, and rushed out the door, barely taking a moment to grab my keys. My mind was a blur, my heart racing in my chest, and my hands were shaking. The drive to the ER felt like it took years. Every second felt like an eternity. The sight of her, so frail and weak in my arms, was all I could think about. I didn't know if we were going to make it. I didn't know if she was going to make it. When we finally got to the hospital, the waiting room felt like it was closing in on me. Emily was holding Lily's hand tightly, trying to calm her, while I sat there, unable to sit still, my mind spiraling into dark places. We were seen immediately, which only terrified me more. The seriousness of it all was evident in the way the doctors moved. There was no waiting around, no time for questions. They rushed Lily into the back room with a sense of urgency I couldn't ignore. After what felt like hours, a doctor came in, his face grim. He didn't mince words. "Lily has a congenital abnormality in her lung. It's compressing her airway. She needs surgery immediately." Those words echoed in my head, and for a moment, the world around me stopped. My legs felt like they would give out. I was suddenly struck by the most overwhelming sense of helplessness. How could this be happening? Not to Lily. Not to my perfect little girl. This didn't happen to families like ours, right? This kind of thing happened to other people, not us. The doctor explained that without the surgery, Lily's condition would only worsen, that she would suffocate. The thought of my daughter, my little girl, fighting for breath like that, like she wasn't already fighting enough, was unbearable. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part came next as the financial officer pulled me aside. It was almost like she was a ghost, her voice flat and cold. Before we proceed with the surgery, we need assurance of payment. The total cost is $120,000. Do you have insurance? I froze. The words hung in the air like a lead weight. I didn't have to answer her. She knew. We didn't have insurance. We had never gotten around to it. We thought we were fine. We were all healthy, why would we need it? But now, standing there, facing the potential loss of my daughter, I realized that not having insurance wasn't just a small mistake. It was a fatal one. We didn't have the money. My business was still small, just starting to pick up steam. We had enough to live on, but not enough for something like this. I stood there, in the cold, sterile hospital room, completely paralyzed by fear. I had $25,000 in savings. That was all. If I sold my car, maybe I could get another $15,000, but that still left us $80,000 short. I couldn't even begin to imagine where I could pull that kind of money from. I had no idea what I was going to do. I wanted to scream. I wanted to collapse. I wanted someone to tell me that this wasn't happening, that this was some kind of nightmare I would wake up from. But no one could help me. No one could fix it. It was all on me now. That's when the thought hit me. My parents, they had money. They weren't rich, but they were comfortable. They had their furniture store, their big house, their fancy cars. They could help, couldn't they? They had to. This was their granddaughter. There was no way they could stand by and let her die. Not when they had the means to help. So, I made the decision. The hardest decision I would ever make. I had to ask them for help. It wasn't something I had ever done before, but this wasn't about me. This was about Lily. I told Emily I was going to go. I told her I'd be back soon, but I didn't know what I was walking into. I didn't know if they would help. I didn't know what I would do if they didn't. All I knew was that I couldn't lose Lily. I gathered myself as best as I could, shoved my fear down deep inside, and walked out of that hospital. The drive to my parents' house felt like it took forever. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I kept replaying the doctor's words in my head, hearing them over and over again. She needs surgery immediately. I didn't know if I could do this. I didn't know if they would say yes, but I knew I had to try. It was the only option left. I could feel the weight of each passing mile as I drove to my parents' house. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles turned white. The drive, though familiar, felt longer, more treacherous this time. I had no idea what to expect when I arrived, but something in my gut told me this wasn't going to go well. As I turned onto their street, I saw it. The driveway was packed with luxury cars, each one more expensive than the last. There were limos parked on the side of the road, stretching beyond the horizon like the cars were outdoing each other. The house itself, always too big for a family of 4, seemed to pulse with energy. I could hear the music blasting from inside even before I reached the door. Laughter, clinking of glasses, voices mingling with a crowd. It was a party, a celebration. I took a deep breath and walked up to the front door, the weight of what was about to happen settling on my chest. My heart was pounding in my ears. When my mom opened the door, it was like a scene out of a movie. She stood there, dressed like she was attending a gala, expensive gown, sparkling jewelry, a glass of wine elegantly held in her hand. She looked surprised. But there was something else too. Was it annoyance? No, that couldn't be it. Not when her own son was standing in front of her, looking like he was about to lose everything. "Ryan, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice laced with impatience. "Mom, I need to talk to you and Dad. It's urgent." "It's about Lily," I said, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. She let out a sigh, barely hiding her frustration, before stepping aside to let me in. As I passed her, I caught a glimpse of the extravagant scene unfolding behind her. It wasn't just a casual get-together. The living room was packed with guests, all dressed to the nines, mingling, laughing, sipping champagne. This wasn't a celebration for family, but for a brand new chapter in Nate's life. It was Nate's engagement party. His wedding was going to be the event of the decade, a statement of wealth and status, something to flaunt to the world. And of course, I wasn't even invited. I walked further into the house, my mind racing. I tried to push aside the anger that was bubbling up, but it was hard not to feel it. Everything about this place, the glitz, the glam, the people who looked like they were from a different world, felt like a slap in the face. How could they be so wrapped up in their own little bubble of excess when my daughter's life was hanging by a thread? Finally, I managed to get my parents alone. It was time. Time to tell them everything. Time to ask for the help I had been too proud to ask for all my life. Mom, Dad, I began, my voice shaking just slightly. Lily needs surgery. They found a serious problem with her lungs. If she doesn't have this surgery, she might not make it. The hospital's charging us $120,000 and we don't have it. We've tried everything, but we're short. I don't know where else to turn. My father listened without saying a word. He just sat there, arms crossed, looking at me with that unreadable expression he had perfected over the years. I couldn't tell what he was thinking, but it didn't matter. I needed him to help. I needed them to help. When I finished, I looked at them both, waiting for a response. But there was nothing. Just silence. I held my breath, desperate for them to say something. Anything. Finally, my father spoke, his voice cold, detached. We've already committed $570,000 to Nate's wedding. We can't afford to help you. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. $500,000. For a wedding. For a party. And they couldn't spare even a dime to save their granddaughter's life. I looked at my mother, searching for some sign of compassion, but her eyes darted away, focusing on the guests in the other room as if she couldn't be bothered with something so trivial. I turned to Nate, hoping against hope that maybe, just maybe, he would understand. After all, he was my brother. We had grown up together, shared everything, and despite everything, I thought there was still a shred of humanity left in him. Please, man, just scale back a little. You don't need a six-figure wedding. Lily is dying. But when I saw the look on his face, any hope I had left vanished. He smirked, like it was all a joke. That sucks, bro, he said, almost dismissively, but what do you expect me to do about it? I couldn't believe it. The man I had grown up with, the one I had always protected, the one I had sacrificed so much for, was just going to let his niece die because he didn't want to scale back his wedding plans? My body went numb. I stood there, frozen, as the reality of the situation sank in. This wasn't just about money. This was about priorities. And my family had made it crystal clear where they stood. I didn't remember walking out of their house. I didn't remember the drive back to the hospital or the rain pounding down on the windshield. All I could feel was the weight of their rejection. A rejection that was as cold and final as the storm outside. I was gasping for breath, but there was no relief, no escape. My own family had abandoned me, abandoned my daughter. I stepped outside, the rain hitting me like needles. It was like the sky was crying for me, crying for Lily. But there was no one else crying. There was no one left to turn to, no one left to help. And then, in that moment of overwhelming pain and exhaustion, something broke inside of me. It was as if the floodgates opened and I remembered what really mattered. It wasn't the glitzy wedding or the luxury cars or the people in that house who didn't care. It was Lily. It was Emily. It was the family that had stood by me through everything. I wasn't alone. I had my real family, the ones who loved me, who cared for me, who would sacrifice anything for me. They were out there waiting for me and I wasn't going to give up. Not now. Not ever. As the rain poured down around me, I realized that sometimes family isn't about blood. It's about who stands by you when everything falls apart. And I knew exactly who my real family was. I walked back into the hospital, my heart heavy with the weight of everything I had just experienced. I wasn't sure what to expect anymore. I wasn't even sure how to feel. But as I rounded the corner and saw Emily's parents sitting there in the waiting room, something in me shifted. They had come from San Antonio, driving through the night the moment they heard. Emily had called them, and without hesitation, they packed up and rushed to be by her side. They weren't wealthy. Her father, John, worked as a plumber, and her mother, Linda, worked part-time at a grocery store. They didn't have the luxury of large sums of money sitting around. But they had love. And that was worth more than anything. I didn't know what to say to them. I didn't know how to thank them for coming, for being here when I felt like I had nowhere else to turn. I could see the worry in their eyes. Their daughter, their granddaughter, was in a fight for her life. When I told them that we were still $40,000 short, despite everything I had tried to sell, despite everything I had borrowed, there was a moment of silence. They didn't panic. They didn't get angry or upset. They simply looked at each other, a quiet understanding passing between them, and then their eyes turned to me. I couldn't read them, but I could see something in their faces that made my chest tighten. "We sold our house," John finally said, his voice calm but firm. "The bank just confirmed. The money will be available tomorrow." Those words hit me harder than I could ever have imagined. My breath caught in my throat. Emily's parents, people who had worked hard their entire lives, who had never been rich, had just given up everything for our daughter. They had sold their home, their security, their future gone, all to help save Lily. In that moment, the world around me seemed to stop. I couldn't comprehend what they were doing. They didn't even hesitate. Without a second thought, they sacrificed their own safety for the sake of our little girl. And I knew in that instant that this was what real family meant. This was what love looked like. They didn't have to do this. They didn't owe us anything. They had their own lives to live, their own struggles to face. But they had given us everything. Everything they had. The surgery was scheduled for the next morning. The hours leading up to it felt like an eternity. It was as though time had become elastic, stretching out, and every second dragged on for what felt like years. Emily and I sat in the sterile waiting room, too scared to speak. There was so much uncertainty, so much fear, but we couldn't let ourselves fall apart. Not now. Not after everything we had been through. The weight of the situation was suffocating. But I couldn't afford to collapse. I had to stay strong for Emily, for Lily, for everyone who had put their faith in us. When the surgeon finally came out, I thought my heart would stop. His face was serious as he approached, but when he spoke, a small glimmer of hope broke through. "The procedure went very well," he said, his voice steady. "Lily will recover. It'll take time, but she'll make it." I don't remember much of what happened after that. I couldn't focus, couldn't breathe. The relief was overwhelming. Tears filled my eyes, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to feel something other than fear. Lily had made it. She was going to be okay. But even as the weight lifted from my chest, something else settled in. It was a quiet realization, one that had been creeping up on me since the moment I had asked Emily's parents for help. This moment had changed me forever. It wasn't just the surgery. It wasn't just that Lily had survived. It was the fact that I had been shown what true family was, what true sacrifice was. It wasn't the blood ties. It wasn't the luxury of wealth or status. It was the ability to give everything without a second thought, without hesitation, to put someone else's well-being above your own. That was something my parents never taught me. They never showed me that kind of love. And that was when I knew. I knew that I would never again depend on people who couldn't see the value of unconditional love. I would never again beg for help from people who put their own vanity and wealth above the lives of their own flesh and blood. I made a promise to myself that day. I swore that I would never need my parents again. I would build a future so secure, so stable, that no one I loved would ever have to beg for help again. It wasn't just about the money. It wasn't just about Lily's surgery. It was about everything. The way Emily's parents had sacrificed everything for us, the way they had stepped up when my own family had turned their backs on us. It wasn't about just paying them back financially. It was about proving that the values I had learned from them, the love, the selflessness, were more important than anything my own parents had ever shown me. I was going to make sure that the people I loved would never feel like they were alone again. I was going to work harder than I ever had before, build something that would provide, something that would protect. For Lily, for Emily, for the people who had stood by us when the world felt like it was falling apart. I wasn't going to let them down. And in that moment, I knew that everything had changed. I threw myself into work with a kind of fury I had never known before. Every ounce of my being was dedicated to building something bigger, something stronger. For the first time in my life, I didn't just want to survive, I wanted to thrive. I wanted to prove to myself, to Emily, and to Lily that we could create a future where no one we loved would ever feel abandoned or alone again. The first few months were a blur. I worked from sunrise to long after sunset, every day blending into the next. I took risks that others would have balked at. I reached out to clients I never thought would take a chance on someone like me, and slowly, one by one, I landed bigger contracts. My small interior design company, which had once barely kept the lights on, began to grow. It started with small office spaces, then expanded into luxury homes, and before I knew it, we were bidding on multi-million-dollar projects. Within 3 years, my company became one of the top design firms in Austin. It was a dream come true, but it wasn't just about the money. It was about the freedom, the independence, the satisfaction of knowing that I had built it all on my own, without anyone's help, without anyone's charity. But I didn't forget those who had helped me along the way. I paid back every single person who had stepped up when I needed them most. Every loan, every favor, I repaid it with interest. Some people might think that was just business, but to me, it was personal. I owed them more than just money. I owed them gratitude, respect, and the promise that I would never forget their kindness. As for Emily's parents, I didn't stop at repaying them. No, I went further. I bought back their house, the one they had sold to help us save Lily. But I didn't just buy it back for market value. I paid 30% over. I wanted them to know that I valued them more than anything money could buy. It was the least I could do for the people who had given everything to us when we had nothing. They hadn't hesitated to sacrifice their security for our family, and now it was my turn to show them what it meant to truly repay a debt of the heart. But as things started to look brighter for us, something unexpected happened. My parents, who had always seemed so untouchable, so sure of themselves, began to fall apart. Their business, once thriving, once the cornerstone of their inflated sense of self-worth, started to crumble. They had always lived beyond their means, throwing money at appearances, trying to impress people who didn't care. But eventually, their reckless spending caught up with them. I watched it all happen from a distance, not sure whether to feel sorry for them or just let the consequences of their actions unfold. And then, one day, I received a call. It was from my mother, of course. Her voice was shaky, desperate. "Ryan, we're about to lose the house. Can you loan us $200,000? The words hit me like a slap in the face. The same people who had abandoned me, the same people who had chosen a wedding over their granddaughter's life, were now asking me for help. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream, but I knew I had to see them face to face. I agreed to meet them at a cafe, a neutral ground, but I couldn't let myself feel sympathy. Not yet. I let them talk, let them pour out their sob story about how bad things had gotten. They talked about their failing business, their lost friends, how the money just wasn't enough anymore. I listened. But the whole time, something inside me simmered. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for. When they were done, I pulled a few $100 bills from my wallet and placed them carefully on the table. "Drinks are on me," I said, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. "That's all I can do. You see, I'm planning my son's baby shower and I can't cancel it. We're going all out." Their faces fell. I could see the realization hit them like a freight train. My father's jaw clenched as he stared at me, disbelief in his eyes. "You're joking, right?" he muttered, unable to comprehend what I had just said. I let the silence hang for a moment before I let out a small, almost imperceptible smirk. "Oh, so now parties are a bad way to spend money?" I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Funny how that works. I didn't wait for their response. I stood up, feeling the weight of everything I had been through, and walked away. As I left, I could hear my mother's frantic voice behind me. But I didn't turn back. I walked out the door, into the rain, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. Not because I had taken any kind of joy in seeing them squirm, but because I had finally found peace. I had finally severed the ties that had once bound me to people who didn't deserve my loyalty. When I walked out of that cafe, I walked straight into the arms of my real family. I thought about Emily, about Lily, and about the people who had stood by me when I had nothing. There was no sweeter victory than this. No revenge, no moment of triumph could ever compare to the quiet sense of fulfillment that came from knowing I had built my life on my own terms. In the end, it wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the house, or the business, or the so-called success. It was about the people who had never asked for anything in return but had given me everything. And I had kept my word. I had built something strong, something lasting, so no one I loved would ever have to ask for help again. That, my friends, was the sweetest victory of all. If this story made you reflect, feel free to share your thoughts or feedback in the comments. Your opinions mean a lot and let me know that the story has touched someone's heart. Don't forget to hit like if you enjoyed this content, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss out on more inspiring and meaningful stories to come. Let's continue the journey of discovering true values in life together.